murderers and the killers. Those are all the words that the President of the United States has used to describe our fellow human beings who, by the way, when they come to this country, commit crimes at a far lower rate than those who were born in the United States of America. But this inflaming of that racism, this allowing of it to come out into the open, markedly at a rally in May in Florida, where when the president was warning of this invasion of immigrants coming to our country, and he says, what do we do about it? How do we stop them? Someone in the crowd yells out, shoot them. And literally the whole place goes up, roaring with laughter, smiles on everyone's faces. The president also laughs and smiles his consent or assent. And this killer who drove to El Paso with that AK-47, before he begins to try to take the lives of our fellow Americans, our fellow human beings, he posts a manifesto warning of an invasion using the exact same words that the President of the United States used, talking about his fear of being replaced by a non-white minority who he fears at some point will become the majority. Walks into that Walmart and kills 22 people on the Saturday before the first day of school in El Paso, Texas. Kids with their parents and grandparents shopping for school supplies. People innocently going about their lives, all because, as he told the police afterwards, he wanted to kill Mexicans. 90-year-old man killed next to his 87-year-old wife. They had been married for 70 years. They had survived everything that life could throw at them, including one another, only to be killed by somebody fueled by hatred and armed with a weapon of war. We have to connect the dots and draw the conclusion that this is the most dangerous president the United States has ever had. He poses a threat to the well-being and the lives of our fellow Americans. So many people now feel like, because they tell me and I know, that they're walking around with a target on their backs because of who they pray to, or who they love, or the country they come from, or the color of their skin, or how many generations they can count themselves an American, or whether they just got here yesterday. We have to organize together for one another against that and for the best traditions of this country. Not defining ourselves by our differences or seeing those differences as disqualifying or dangerous. Not trying to stoke fear and anxiety and paranoia, but understanding that the fact that we come from the planet over and have found a home here in the United States, those differences are fundamental to our strength, to our success, and to our safety, and yes, our security. That we have never yet lived up to the promise included in the Declaration of Independence, that we are all created equal, but we've also never given up until this administration and this president. We have to reclaim that dream, live up to that potential, fulfill the promise of this country. And lastly, I think it's really important to understand that everything that we care about is connected to everything and everyone we care about. When we fail to make progress on healthcare and leave it as a function of luck or circumstance or privilege instead of a basic human right, when people are having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by in the greatest economy the world has ever seen, when we fail to successfully confront climate change and leave people on the front lines of a warming planet, the anger that they can justifiably feel, their frustration at our dysfunction, will be used by a demagogue like Donald Trump and directed against the most vulnerable, the defenseless, those who do not have a voice or a defender in this great democracy. So we must make progress on all fronts, and the only way to do that is to bring everyone in. And that's why I'm here today. That's why I'm traveling the country. That's why I'm running to serve you as the President of the United States. And I'm grateful for your time. Thank you all for having me. Really appreciate it. I would love to take some questions or comments, if that's okay with you.
Firstly, thank you once again to Amy and to Beto for visiting us and honoring us with your presence here today. So what we'll do, inshallah, right now is we'll take some questions. I've been told, due to the limited time that we have, we'll take a maximum of 4 questions. So after those questions are done, then what we'll do is that those individuals that would like to take pictures and meet Beto and his wife, we would ask that you line up over here in a uniform fashion so that we're not rushing we're not, creating a fire hazard of any sort. So please, if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll come to you first. I saw his hand first, so I'll come to him.
Thank you, sir, for visiting us today. It's a privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
My question to you is regarding the gun control. We know it's an issue in this country. President Trump has been able to bypass so many politicians with a stroke of a pen to, with an executive order, to pass so many laws, so many things that he wanted to pass, but he couldn't do it by himself. Why is everybody so afraid of the NRA? Why couldn't, as a president yourself, how would you be able to fight them and pass the gun control laws that we need in this country to eliminate some of the animals that exist on the street?
Yes, thank you for asking. The question is, why have we done absolutely nothing about the fact that we lost 40,000 Americans to gun violence last year? That the 22 people killed this year in El Paso, Texas, the 7 who were murdered with an AR-15 in Midland and Odessa just last Saturday, the suicides by gun, 22,000 a year that we see in this country, and the deaths that happen 1 or 2 at a time, so commonly, so numbing that they fail to even make the headlines of the newspaper or the nightly news. You mentioned the NRA. Their ability to purchase the complicity of members of Congress or their silence in the face of this tragedy goes a long way towards explaining the result that otherwise would be inexplicable. I do not take money from the NRA. I don't take money from any political action committee. I don't listen to them. I listen to people. The judgment I fear more than any other is that of my kids who go to school afraid that a gunman is going to walk through that door and take their lives or the lives of the teacher who's sacrificing so much for them already. So we propose not only universal background checks, red flag laws that would stop a gunman before it is too late, ending the sales of weapons of war, but also buying back the AK-47s and AR-15s that are on our streets and in our homes right now, having mandatory licensing and registration for every gun that is owned and held in the United States. And the political question you ask, how are we going to get that ambitious agenda done when we haven't gotten anything less ambitious done in the last 30 years? That is to go and listen to people where they are. Not just Democrats, not just non-gun owners, but Republicans and gun owners, non-gun owners, Democrats, independents alike. And that's what we've been doing. And what we have found, this will come as no surprise to you, that those who own AR-15s and AK-47s also have children. They're also concerned about their welfare and their safety. They also understand that what's happening in this country should not be able to happen, or else we come to the conclusion that we are inherently evil and that this is our fate and our future and our lot, and they're not willing to accept that. So as I've listened to them, I have found that there's more that we agree on than we disagree on. There's a political will and consensus. It just needs to be reflected by our leadership in the White House and in the majorities that we must produce in both the House and the United States Senate. And if those current representatives will not listen to their constituents, I am confident that there is the public pressure and the political will and the sentiment of the people of this country to force them to do the right thing. So I'm confident, based on the people that I've listened to, the travels we've made, that we can do this, and yes, that I would sign that into law.
The executive order.
And yes, and we would start day one by executive action, ensuring that this is treated as the national emergency that it is, directing funding to buy back weapons voluntarily at first, because that's all we can do by executive action, and then we will mandate it through an act of Congress. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll take 3 more questions. So I see his hand up, and then we'll take 2 more after that.
Well, thank you for coming here.
Thank you.
I have one question, that everyone knew that the big donors are siphoning money into these candidates, the Congress, President.
Yes.
And of course, those candidates will adopt policies which in favor of those big guys, not in favor of the majority of the people.
Yes.
despite this fact, the people they go there and elect Trump and elect I don't know XY. Although they know that their policies will be in favor of those big guys, not in favor of the people. Why these other people don't adopt another policy? Don't give them, give these other people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. You're absolutely right. Money purchases not just influence, not just access, but outcomes. Otherwise, how do we explain the fact that we pay more for prescription medications than any other country on the face of the planet, though you and I, as taxpayers, invested in those medications and cures in the first place? Or the gun laws that make absolutely no sense. They're not good for us, but they're great for the gun manufacturers, whose lobbyists have entree to those members of Congress and are able to decide the outcomes of that legislation. It's not enough not only to not take PAC money, as we're doing. We've got to make sure that we pass legislation that prohibits elected officials and those running for office from taking PAC money. So they're listening to you and your neighbors and our families and our communities, and not corporations or special interests or political action committees. And then your specific question about Donald Trump. I think we have to draw these connections, not only the rise in hate crimes in America that we're seeing against the Islamic community or the Mexican American community or any number of communities given the president's rhetoric, but to those farmers in Iowa that we've been listening to, who are no longer able to sell to China thanks to this trade war and the tariffs that the president has put up, who are already sinking in debt and now are overwhelmed and are having to sell their farms. Those steel workers who were promised the moon and who are now losing their jobs. Wage earners who saw their wages only increase 0.5% last year, despite the largest tax cut in U.S. history that really resulted in a tax increase, about $1,000 per household. We've got to make those connections clear, connect the dots, and then help people decide that there is a better future by supporting someone who will involve every single one of us in the solution. No PACs, no lobbyists, no corporations, just people. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
One question here, and we'll take one more after this one.
Thank you for making the visit. Like to know, have you been briefed on Kashmir, the part in the Indian subcontinent? The Indian government has suspended their autonomy, and more than 2 million people have been under curfew. So no news, no health care, and no access to basic civil rights.
Right.
And what are your views on it? And if elected, how would you resolve that issue?
Thank you for asking a really difficult question. And I think this is an opportunity for the United States and our foreign policy to reestablish our stature and our standing in the world. We used to stand up and stand for something, and especially those oppressed minorities around the world who were not given voice or were very often persecuted or ran the risk of being exterminated in the countries that they were. You mentioned what is going on in Kashmir. We think about the Rohingya in Myanmar, the Uyghurs in China. We think about what Mohammed bin Salman is doing to the people of Yemen right now, precipitating the next great humanitarian crisis on this planet. And the president, in many of these cases, turns a blind eye or turns the back of the United States, and in other cases is actively helping these dictators and these thugs to do this to our fellow human beings right now. So we must stand up and use our relationship with Prime Minister Modi, for example, to make sure that he's accountable for the actions that he's taking. We must call out the rise of nationalism in all parts of the world, including the United States, and understand that with the rise of nationalism comes the suppression of minorities in those countries. And then we've got to look ourselves in the mirror and acknowledge what we're doing here in this country to minorities who do not pray like the majority, look like the majority, come from the countries that the majority comes from today. The fact that in white America there is 10 times the wealth that there is in black America, that we have the largest prison population on the face of the planet, bar none, and it's disproportionately comprised of people of color. In other words, we need to make sure that we get our house in order so that we have the moral standing to help the people in Kashmir, to help the people in Myanmar, to help the people in China and the world over. But yes, that would be a priority of our foreign policy, to reestablish the standing of the United States and to help those oppressed minorities wherever they are around the world. Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much. And a final question here right in front.
So grateful that you're here. My husband has Beto or bust on on his Facebook. So I'm glad that you guys found time for each other too as well in New Hampshire. I wanted to ask you about the Electoral College because in spite of the popular vote being won by Hillary, we lost the election. So what are you doing to reach out for the black vote as well as to reach out the red states? You are from one red state, hopefully turning purple and blue at this point. But that scares me that with the Russian interference in the election and the Department of Justice being under bar, we are not really prepared for anything like that happening again.
Great question. And, you know, if we could, we would abolish the Electoral College, or many of us who see it as inimical with true democracy in this country. One person, one vote, being able to decide these elections by the popular will of this country. That's not likely to happen anytime soon. So your question is, what do we do in the meantime? And to your point, we go to the bluest places in the country to make sure that people are not taken for granted, that we don't presume how they're going to vote. Give them a reason to, because we've given them a chance to tell their stories and participate in the conversation. But in addition, we also go to the reddest places in this country to make sure that no one is written off. Everyone's given a chance to participate. Last week we went to Bland County, Virginia. It's in the southwestern part of the state, not too far from the coal mining part of our country. No candidate for president from either party has ever been to Bland County before. And so to all of the people in Bland County who showed up, all 13 of them, at least we had a chance to introduce ourselves, and I had a chance to listen to them and make sure they understood what those issues are, and to make sure that they know that they're going to be part of the future of this country, that we're going to transition those coal jobs, we're going to protect their pensions and their health care, we're going to make sure that they know that they count and that their children matter and that they will have a future in this country. That's how we fight for every single vote. We concede absolutely no part of this country to anyone. And it reminds me very much of that Senate race that we ran in Texas, showing up to places that had not seen a Democrat in decades, going to a place that had not seen a Senate candidate since 1948 when Lyndon Baines Johnson showed up as a member of Congress to listen to the people that he wanted to serve and to represent. And at the end of the day, though we did not defeat Ted Cruz, we won more votes than any Democrat had in the history of the state of Texas, won independents, importantly, for the first time in decades, won nearly 500,000 Republicans, flipped 2 seats of Congress, elected 17 African-American women to judicial positions in Harris County, literally changing the face of criminal justice in our most diverse city in the process. In other words, I know that this works, and for that reason, I'm running this campaign in the same way. Yes, we're in New Hampshire today, and of course, we're in Iowa and South Carolina and Nevada, the first 4 states in the nominating process, but I've also been in Arkansas and in Mississippi, in Oklahoma, in Kansas, in Missouri, in other states that very often are not included because they're not early enough in the selection process. We're going to them, and they're coming out. And I'm confident that that's how we build the coalition to defeat Donald Trump. That's how we bring this country together at a time of such division to accomplish such an ambitious agenda and be up to the array of threats that we face right now. So that's the way we're meeting this challenge. Thank you for asking. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
So right now, that's what we'll do for questions at the moment. On behalf of the Islamic Society of New Hampshire and the Board of Trustees, we can't thank you enough for taking the time out today. Please give another round of applause for our guests. And also your wife, Amy, members of your staff, Soham and Ali, and I'm sure I'm missing a lot of names of individuals that have come, and members of the press and your staff. We're delighted to have you here. We have some food for you, so please, our community is very hospitable. You don't ever leave on an empty stomach, so you must fill your stomach and then leave wherever you're going. So I'd humbly ask all of our community members that if you'd like to take a picture or ask a question in person to Beto or members of his staff or even meet his wife, please line up in an orderly fashion so we can move quickly. Our guest has a hard stop at 2:30, so please respect and honor that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.